welcome back everyone. I hope everybody had a good break and a good lunch. And we are welcome for the second session of the day one of the OSAN conference. I am Dr. Pragya Chaube, project scientist at DST-CPR IISc Bangalore, and I am the co-lead and the co-organizer on the OSAN project along with Dr. Mamita Kole and Dr. Gautam Sharma and with our PI Professor T. Abhinandanan. So we would like to welcome you all again, welcome you all back, and I will just quickly hand over the floor to Momita for the first panel of the conference, which is basically open science in the context of South Asia. And joining us would be our panelists, Professor Rahul Siddharthan from India, Professor Tariq from Bangladesh, and Professor Buna Bhandari from Nepal. Now, quickly, Momita, can you please take over the floor?
Yeah, thank you, Pragya, for the kind introduction. So what we have seen in last few decades is the science ecosystem has taken a shape where a journal paywall is blocking the content. Overemphasis on the intellectual property protection is locking the knowledge propagation, and a competitive structure has formed among the actors of this ecosystem, which hampering the growth of scientific knowledge. Against this backdrop, the open science movement started, and it is promoting the culture of knowledge sharing, collaboration, cooperation, and transparency. It's also bringing back science to its core social value. Researchers from low and middle income countries face a lot of challenges in access to knowledge and also resources for conducting the research. They can benefit immensely if they start adopting the open science practices, especially when publicly funded science is concerned, especially when there is no commercial value where it's the science, when it's the basic science. We have seen that the Ibero-American and African countries are developing open science-based infrastructures in their region. They're promoting more collaboration and sharing of knowledge to tackle the complex questions of social developments. Open science is a much discussed topic in Southeast Asia as well. But what about South Asia? 20% of the world's population live here. The region has one of the most highest economic growth. On the other hand, is struggling with low human development index and poverty. And 44% of the global disease burden is from South Asia. Among the most 40 polluted cities in the world, 37 are in this region. So we believe that proper utilization of the power of IISc can change this complex situation. But all these challenges that we are talking about cannot be tackled in isolation. Instead, the scientists and authorities of this region need to come together to build a collaborative science ecosystem. There must be a mechanism to facilitate seamless access to knowledge and resources. Basically, the research ecosystem needs to embrace open science. But how we can do it? The region share a long history of culture and tradition where they have a very much similarity, but the disconnection is as profound as the historic connection. Against this backdrop, how open science can be used to address the challenges of the region? What are the opportunities? What are the barriers? We have three eminent scientists from Bangladesh, India, and Nepal to discuss these issues today. So let me first introduce our panelists. I will go by the alphabetic order of the country name. So from Bangladesh, we have Professor Abdullah Shams bin Tariq, who is a professor of physics and deputy director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at the University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Apart from research in particle and nuclear physics, he has worked for research capacity building in Bangladesh, pioneering the Library Consortium of Bangladesh for access to e-resources, the Arun High Performance Computing Cluster, one of the first in Bangladesh, open for researchers as well. He is an open access enthusiast, particularly concerning the author-pay model of open access implementation. From India, we have Professor Rahul Siddharthan, who is a professor at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences, Chennai, India. His main research interests are in regulatory genomics, chromatin, and evolution, and recently in machine learning and clinical outcomes. He's also interested in the larger question of open science and data sharing, and chaired a thematic group on open science as a part of Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, STEP 2020 of India drafting process. Professor Buna Bhandari is an assistant professor of epidemiology. She is from Nepal, And she is a professor at Central Department of Public Health, Tribhuvan University Institute of Medicine, Kathmandu. She holds a PhD from School of Population Health, University of New South Wales, Australia. She is a lone scholar for this cardiovascular health program at the Department of Global Health, Howard Chan School of Public Health, USA. She is involved in the capacity development of young researchers from LMICs in scientific writing through mentoring, facilitating webinars and online courses. As a steward and guest facilitator of Author ID NIASP UK. So I will pose my first question to all the panelists. So what are the current status of open science in your country? Because if you don't know where do we stand, we can't improve the situation as well. So this is my first question to the panelists. What is the status of open science in your country? You can elaborate on not just on the access to research article, but on how much data is available, and is there a policy related to open access or open research data? And what about the sharing of research infrastructure or even reform in research assessment, another key pillar of open science? And also you can tell that whether there are citizen science projects taken seriously in those countries as well. Again, I will invite in the alphabetic order of the countries. So first to Bangladesh, Professor Tariq, over to you. Professor Tariq? Professor Tariq?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
I will use a few slides for the first part of my talk, but then I will switch back to talking. Just about a few things about Bangladesh. So actually, what I would like to first mention is that it is, it's interesting that the call for open science rose from developed countries. You would perhaps, it is conceivable that it should have risen from our countries. And initially, when we heard the term open science or open access, we were excited. We thought that, something good is going to happen and all our problems will be solved. And we are still mostly at the receiving end of it. This is something that we need to think about. Like most places, open science is often taken as an extension of open access. So open access started first, and now we are kind of expanding into other areas of open access, of open science. So we're talking about open data, open software, open community, community science, things like that. So initially, as I said, most of us were excited, but then in practice, I think we all have felt this, that it isn't really delivering much for us, because in practice, real progress is not that easy, and with a few exceptions, not much real change has been achieved. So for at least for us. So apart from very few exceptions, there are some exceptions. For example, areas where green open access has worked very well, high energy physics, everything all over the world is open access. Everything is on the preprint archive. It's fine there, but that is a small community. I also belong to that community, but that is it's not the whole world. It's not a solution for. It's not yet a solution for everyone. So in Bangladesh, we really haven't done much. To be frank, we haven't been able to do much yet. There is a lot of talk, but little real action. I will mention two examples of real action where something has happened and something has been done. So previously, journals that were published in Bangladesh were rarely read. So these would just sit in the bookshelves of the authors, perhaps, not even readers. They wouldn't have many readers. But with Banglajol, there was this journals online platform, and this is something that was started by an organization called IISc, and they did a really good job. So many journals went online. Currently, 150 plus journals are online, though I must admit they are of variable regularity and quality. So some of them are regular, but some of them are not. Some of them are not so high quality. But I mean, and Banglajol is not open access by requirement. Not all journals have to be open access, but they are. Currently, all journals are. And what has happened is, this has improved the quality. Now they are more in public view, so accessible to scrutiny. You know that if you publish something, then 10 years later, you may be charged for plagiarism because it's out there in the open, and things like that. And what has really made the change, the last line, is that hundreds of thousands of views and downloads from all over the world. This is something that would not have happened if this was not open access. So this is something, this is one of the, the real plus points that open access has achieved. And there are similar initiatives, SLJOL in Sri Lanka, NEPJOL in Nepal, in Nepal in South Asia, and AJOL in Africa, CAMJOL in Central America, VJOL in Vietnam, and Mongolia JOL. So in India, there are initiatives, but not exactly in such like in everything in one place. I'm not aware of. And so this is a map. This is an old map actually from 2013, I think, but still it shows like visitors from USA and visitors from India. So you can see that readers from all over India, readers from all over the US have looked at journals that are published from Bangladesh. That would not have been read by even a dozen of Bangladeshis previously, before this happened. So this kind of shows what open access can do, and this is really good. So the other area where we have made some progress is digital repositories, though we currently have only, if you go to Open Door, which is the digital open access, the directory of open access repositories, there you will get only 15 from Bangladesh, but there are more that could be there. These are not still well kept, but this is a move in the right direction, that institutions are preparing these, are getting these digital repositories, and India has 105 at the moment on Open Door. Nepal has only 1, Sri Lanka has 16, Pakistan has only 4. So this is still one area where there is some progress. So putting things in a digital repository and then making them open access, and that it works. But the real point I would like to talk about is open access. The way open access has happened, and this is something I have been talking about quite a lot in many different areas, is that we have gone to this author pays model. Most of the flip over has happened in terms of author pays. And what we now find ourselves, is that we will be paying, if we are going to pay these APCs, then our countries will be paying more than we were paying previously for subscription. So author APCs cost more than journal subscriptions. So for a country, the burden is much greater than it was before. And this is a major challenge. In this case, we have played into the hands of the commercial publishers. You remember, open access was against these the grips of these commercial publishers. It was a movement against their grips. But now we find ourselves in a tighter grip in the same hands. And this is where I am very much pro open access, but I am very much against author pays open access. The author pays mode of open access is where we have gone wrong, and we need to change this. We need to switch to other modes. Green open access, wherever there is the archive, the preprint archive, and other forms of that is working for absolutely fantastic. There are other modes of open access that can be done. For example, there are new models, subscribe to open, and things like that, where they use the same library funds that were used previously for subscription, but they are switched over to like sponsor open access, things like that. So they subscribe and they become open. So these are, difficult things to describe, but I think we have to look at alternatives to the author pays model. This is the main message. The author pays model is something that is hitting us hard, and we cannot go with it. We have to raise our voice against it. The Latin American model is also something that should be should be noted. It is something that, I mean, I didn't know about this till a couple of years ago, perhaps, that there, I mean, in Latin America, the academic publishing is actually not for profit, and it's funded by the government. There is literally no commercial publishing. It is all funded by the government or the ministries or the learned bodies and things like that. And something like that, which is sometimes called diamond open access. I mean, diamond or gold or green, these are the two that we need to look for. And whenever we need to, when we are looking at switching subscription journals to open access, we need to look for different models rather than the author pays open access. So that's my message. In Bangladesh, there is the development in other cases in policy in terms of open data, in terms of open software is very low. So these are all, there is some paperwork being done, but not much real change. So I think I should stop here to let others speak. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Tariq. Obviously, elaborating on the global issue and as well as where Bangladesh stands. So I will now invite Professor Siddharthan to elaborate on the situation in India and what has been done here. Over to you, Professor Siddharthan.
Yeah, thanks, Momita, and all the organizers for this invitation. So I'd like to thank Professor Tariq for correctly laying out several aspects of the open access situation, that it was led by the developed world, and I would say things like coalitionness are kind of imposed on researchers by interests in the developed world. The whole problem with the APC model, which started off with good intentions and has been basically co-opted by the same usual suspects as nature, IISc, and so on. One thing that I was not convinced, it may be true in the Bangladesh context, but not in the Indian context so far, is would an author pays APC actually be a burden to the exchequer? We did some calculation a while ago, and various people have floated a figure of India's journal subscription cost for the whole country paid by the government, excluding private universities and so on, is about rupees 1,500 crore or roughly $200 million US. I don't know, give or take. If we just looked at one prominent journal like Nature, the calculation for that, if everybody was just Nature, the main flagship journal, not all the subsidiaries, the cost of all universities subscribing to that in India would be something like 200 crores, if I remember the calculation. And whereas if you were to pay for all articles that have been published in, let's say, PLOS One, which is, or all the PLOS journals, PLOS One is the most popular because it has the most volume and is the easiest to publish in. But if you look at all Indian authors who have published there over the last year, the burden is only a few tens of crores. And the reason, of course, is that if the reader pays, there are many, many more readers, whereas if the author pays, there are very few authors, but everybody gets to benefit. However, this is true in principle, and in practice, authors find it a burden to pay. They have to have research grants for it. Funding agencies in India speak in mixed voices, and this is true all of, even in developed countries. There are many authors who don't have the funding for this. And where APCs used to be something like $1,000 to $2,000, now they are approaching $10,000 or even exceeding that. So it has become a profit-making business like any other, and it needs to be overhauled. One option could be the community model that PLOS is pushing, where universities basically subscribe to PLOS the way they would to a journal, but that gives the university members the right to publish there. So I'll say a few things about open science more broadly. So historically, I would say open source came first, open source software. And this is where I personally got interested in so I was a PhD student in the 90s. That's when arXiv became big among physicists. But that's also when what was previously called the free software movement kind of exploded because of Linux and because Netscape Navigator went open source and became Firefox and became Mozilla at that point, and a whole bunch of large corporates got interested in it. But there was an ideology from the ground, and the idea of open source was really a rebranding of free software to make it more friendly to commercial people. This is not some kind of communist ideology. This is a practical way to push knowledge for the benefit of everybody while keeping your commercial interests intact. And the requirement in open source is not just that you open your source, but there are certain, you cannot restrict other people from sharing it. You must give credit. A lot of things that have carried on more or less directly into the broader concepts of open access and open science. And then, of course, in the late 90s was Wikipedia, which became open knowledge in a very broad sense. And those are the things that have, in the public, maybe exploded the idea of open, I would call it open knowledge more broadly. The third component of open science is, of course, open data. And that is where we have a big problem. And it's very field specific. So I'd like to highlight in bioinformatics, there was a meeting led by the major funders in 2003. It was called the Fort Lauderdale. It was held at Fort Lauderdale, and it was held at the, I think the main organizer was the Wellcome Trust, and NIH and others participated. And out of that came an agreement. You can find it online, and it's really worth reading. It's only 4 or 5 pages. It's called a system of tripartite responsibility between data funders, data providers, which is the researchers who generate the data, and data users, which are other users that use the data. This was at the time when sequencing data was becoming big. It was been growing exponentially ever since then. And the agreement was basically that all 3 parties have a legitimate interest in the data, and there is an interest to science broadly for data when it is generated to be made available as broadly as possible. So data generators are required to make the data available as and when it's vetted by them, even prior to publication, even before they have published a manuscript. They are encouraged to make their data available. Data users are encouraged to respect the rights of the data providers, not scoop them, not do any kind of analysis that will overlap what they're doing. And data funders are asked to encourage this system too. And it has worked extremely well in bioinformatics for the last 20 years. All journals require authors to submit their data to NCBI or some such database at the time of submitting the manuscript or prior to submitting the manuscript. And it can be embargoed until publication, but it should be made available. And in principle, referees should be able to see it. I don't think this has penetrated to a great extent to other areas in science. It is there in basic biology, but not so much in medicine, partly because of patient confidentiality issues. I've been working with the clinical community and publishing, and I see this attitude that even after we publish the data, it is still our data, nobody else should be able to use it, we need it for our next paper. So there is a very cultural thing there. And okay, so far nothing that I've said is really India specific. This is true all over the world. In terms of India, what can we do in terms of open data and open source? Okay, I should say one more thing about open source, that many journals require open source software. I mean, if you have developed your own software, you should open source it. You should avoid proprietary software like MATLAB and Mathematica, and even for your basic infrastructure. But even if you use MATLAB, the scripts that you write should be open source. That's a requirement of many journals, at least in the biology community. But where do you store that code? If you look at the papers, a lot of it historically has been in the author's own web pages, and there is link rot. If you look at papers from early 2000s, you won't find a lot of that software anymore. More recently, people have been using services like GitHub, but there are problems there too. GitHub is a proprietary service. It's basically run by Microsoft, and you don't know what they will do tomorrow. So similar to NCBI's data archive, bioinformatic data archives, it would be desirable to have a software archive for scientists. Now, where can developing countries contribute? I strongly feel, especially countries like India, we can contribute in the areas that are missing. So where we have NCBI, where we have PubMed Central or Archive or bioarchive, I feel we should not be duplicating those efforts. We should be working with them, maybe offering to host mirror services or contributing to their funding and so on. Where something does not exist, if there is a field where there is no standard archive, or if there is no standard archive for academic software or for for data types in certain fields other than biomedicine, those are things where India and other countries can really take the lead. And we have thriving software industries, we have publishing backend industries. I saw, Author Cafes are, co-sponsor of this event. Many large Western publishers use India as a backend, and probably Bangladesh also. So these are things where we have the skills and expertise, and we should be working with the West to expand the ecosystem of open data, open source, open science. So I'll stop with that. I don't know whether I've taken up too much time. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul, for elaborating a lot of issues, and especially since that author pay model already has penetrated so much, we can't even avoid it probably. We need an alternate, or we need more dialogue. So definitely we can come back to this point, because you showed some calculation and Professor Tariq also had said his opinion about it. We can come back. But before that, I would just go to Professor Bhandari to know where Nepal stands when we talk about open science. Professor Bhandari, over to you.
Thank you, Mamita, and organizer, for providing such a wonderful opportunity to talk about and hear about the open science, especially in the context of South Asia. And as already Professor Tariq and Professor Rahul had mentioned about the context of Bangladesh and India. So Nepal is also like the similar, or the I would say the less than that, like in the progress of open science. So while for the open science, while I was looking at the literature and based on my experience as well, Nepal is taking some steps, but I would say it is a baby step. And before, like the previously, when there was no digitalization, like this scenario, usually the Nepalese journal were publishing the paper-based publication. So at that time, I remember, if we have to see the historical perspective, there was a Research for Life, and that was providing the different kind of open access to the researcher from Nepalese researcher, like Hinari for the biomedical science and the Agora for the agriculture science and other different databases, and which had the institutional subscription based. So those researcher or academician affiliated to some organization, and those organization who has those subscription for the facilities of the Hinari, then they were using those kind of literature which was published globally. So now talking about the Nepalese literature or the articles which are being published in Nepal, as Professor Tariq already mentioned about the NEPJOL as well. So in Nepal, I think in 2007, INAFS, with the support of INAFS, the NEPJOL was started, and now around 280 journals, Nepalese journal, are under the Nepal journal online, like NEPJOL. So through that also, paper published from the Nepalese researcher, or like in the Nepalese journal, they are widely been disseminated, or people from the other part of the world are also seeing those literature and citing those kind of study. Because I remember when I was an undergrad student, I published one of the paper, and which is like in the local journal from my, I think, undergrad study, and it was not at that time not indexed, not in NEPJOL, but later on it was in 2007 it was came under the NEPJOL. And now if I see that paper was cited, like the 50-60 citation is there, so, and from the globally. So that I don't have the figure of the, it's Professor Tariq shows the map, like the global viewer, but from that experience also we can see that like the viewer or visibility of the Nepalese articles are being increased, but still I would say the quality, like there are various quality of the journal, and also the impact factor. There is like the so only some of the journals has that kind of criteria, or the quality check are being done. So one is the while we are talking about the open access, we should also think about the quality of the paper, quality of the journal. So that also would impact the open publication system. And another one is regarding the electronic information depository, from 2009, there is the National Library and Information Consortium is formed, and they are also actively working for the online depository advocacy and information dissemination, while looking at the website or the paper publication. But if I have to say the real experience, I'm working in a university, though I was overseas for some years, but there is very less information is disseminated at the university level to the students, to the academician, to the researcher. And some of the information are paper based and just for the organizing some event and workshop. But if we have to see exactly the implementation side, how it is being used, or how the user are using those systems, it is very what I can say, the distressing scenario. So we have, for the open access, one is we have to invest on the open access system, and other one is to the increasing the awareness about to the institution level and other part of the, like, who are the user of those open access system, benefit of that. And one more thing I have seen in the university, usually there is a system of the publication for the promotion, and people are some people, like the tradition, they were just forcing for publication and not thinking about the open access, copyright, all those things. So whatever easily available, so those kind of traditional barriers are also there. And I was looking at the policies regarding the open access and the data repository in context of Nepal. There are some organizations working in Nepal, like Open Access Nepal from 2014 and Open Knowledge, 2-3 organizations, and there is a mention of about the drafting of the open access policy from the Ministry of Education level, but it is not yet endorsed in context of Nepal. So if there is not proper policy about the copyright and the all those usability or the other depository system, then also the issue of the open access would be huge, or that there is a lots of challenges. Therefore, I would say, like in Nepal, it is just emerging, and also it is the individual base or some organization only involved. There is no proper networking or the collaborative effort is being done. And now we are all the like the different people from the South Asia are here, and as Professor Tariq already mentioned, in African context there is a regional system. So I think not only from the national level, now we have to work collaboratively from the South Asian region, so that we can uplift and develop the culture of open access, so that we all can benefit from this. I would stop here, and thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Professor Bhandari, for showing that. Yeah, most of the places we are actually seeing that, even for India or Bangladesh, also our discussion is very much centered towards this knowledge output, for example, article or data. But when we talk about open science as a more broader view, it should be not just some knowledge output. What do you see as a barrier when we talk about open science overall? So, for example, in your country, do you have some formal mechanism of collaboration, sharing of resources, as well as because as I was mentioning, that we are so much bounded towards this knowledge output. All our scientists are measured in terms of how many papers or where do we publish. So is there do you think that's a barrier, or is there a discussion to overcome all this to make the science ecosystem more productive or working more towards societal need? Because as current, we have so many global challenges. So is there any such kind of discussion happening in Nepal?
Thank you, Mohamita. So talking about the barriers, I think we have touched some of the point already, but the foremost, I would say, like not only in context of Nepal, I think LMIC and South Asian context, the most important part is the funding, less funding. So less funding for the research as well as the less funding for such initiative, for the discussion, for the workshop, for training, awareness generation. So open access, as you already mentioned, is not only the literature, that there is software or the infrastructure, the good library and other, like UNESCO has stated the 12 fundamental factor for the open access. So for all those quality maintenance, we should have a educate funding for those kind of things. So funding is also one, I think, one of the barrier. Now we are struggling with the other basic need in the in context of like our research or other thing also, like with the pandemic and other diseases are emerging and the funding for the research is very limited. So that is one of the part, I think, the lack of infrastructure, and everything would be covered by the funding. So now we have to think about the increasing the funding for the research as well as for those kind of open access. And other one is the policies. I already mentioned there is no clear policies about the open access or the data repository, copyright issues. So who are the user, how the information would be protected and how it would be regulated. So if until and unless there would be the guiding policy for those open access, then like the providing the funding only could not help in this context. So there should be the guiding policy, and even I would say like the policy should be encouraging to every level, even like for the promotion, as I already mentioned, there is this many of paper you have to publish for the for the promotion. But if they say you have to publish in the open access journal or some kind of, I also do not remember the government funding for the researcher or the author for the publication, they have to pay by themselves. And one more challenge, like for the open access publication also, what I feel is like now recently Nepal is upgraded to the LMIC, like based on the GNI. And most of the journal who used to provide the waiver of the publication fee for the open access, now that is cut down. But the reality is we are doing the research when we are in the low income country, now low middle income, but the funding for the research and the other infrastructure, nothing has changed. And for those kind of I don't know, like that kind of also the barrier for acting as the barrier for the researcher for open access. And other thing is like the lack of awareness or institutional inertia. I would say the institutional inertia, because there are some initiatives. I was looking at the literature and based on my experience, but there are something is being done about there was a conference about open science in 2013 in Nepal as well. But nothing is disseminated. Nobody is talking about it institutional level about the open access, even in the curricula or in the library. Also, librarians are also not not adequately trained, and those information are not disseminated to the students and the academician and the researcher. So I think the lack of motivation or the lack of awareness is also one of the major challenges. So until and unless we are not motivated, we do not get adequate information how to go with the open access, what are the benefit of the open access. So this kind of challenge could not be solved. And political will, I would say, that is for the everything, not like the only for the open access, but for the policy making. So I would say that from the institutional inertia is also the barrier for the open science. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bhandari, for elaborating such nice ways that where Nepal is standing and also what are the barriers. I will ask the similar question to Rahul, because in India, I think the debate on open access or open science has been continuing for quite some time. So we cannot just say that we don't have awareness. So what do you think that what are the barriers? Because we feel that we have not really progressed much in last 10 years, but the discussion was already been done for so long. So this question to you, what are the barriers at this point to adopt open science?
Yeah, thank you, Momita. As you know, in India, we have an open access mandate since 2014 from both the Department of Science and Technology and the Department of Biotechnology. And the problem is the enforcement. So 8 years later, and this mandate runs across fields. And essentially, it's green or gold way, but it means that either it's a preprint version, the final author version of your article, or the published version should be available for free. So one barrier is enforcement from the funder level, that they are not enforcing their own mandates. But I would say there are other barriers which are not unique to India. Okay, let me first say, some things that are unique, that are a particular problem in India and probably the rest of South Asia. One is institutional heterogeneity. We have some elite institutes that are funded at levels approaching, not really approaching, but we get access to good journals. We don't really lack for those kinds of opportunities. And we have central universities where things are much more difficult to get, and there are state universities which are basically neglected. And so in India, probably the top 5-10% get 90% of the resources in terms of academic funding. And that is definitely a barrier to adopting open science, because, but I think open science is also an opportunity to enable research and teaching at the less privileged institutions. One other problem that I think nobody has mentioned so far is that the open access movement has given rise to predatory journals which take your money and publish your paper, but don't do the other things that a journal is supposed to do, like careful peer review and editorial checking and so on. And India has become kind of a factory for such predatory publishers. I think a very large fraction of them are based out of India, partly catering to the Indian market, because Indian agencies and have policies about requiring papers for promotion and things like that. I think the UGC has such a policy, and various promotion committees have policies. So there's a desperation to publish. And it may be open access and it may be mediocre, but people are publishing it anyway. They don't care who sees it because you need it for your promotion. I think that is, if not a barrier to achieving open access directly, it gives open access a bad name. So there is, apart from institutional heterogeneity, there's heterogeneity in fields. So in biosciences, author pays open access has become almost inevitable. In physics, mathematics, computer science, green open access has been pretty standard for 3 decades now. But in other fields, like in engineering, they kind of depend on IEEE and organizations like that, which are closed access. And I've seen view the author pays model, even if it's a very nominal amount, as essentially a scam. I mean, they don't, predatory journals, as I said, have given a bad name. And though there are legitimate open access publishers like PLOS and so on, in fields which have not seen that, it seems something inconceivable. So, so there are two kinds of, well, multiple kinds, but talking about green versus gold, and the ideal would be platinum, where it is a journal publication and there is no APC. Gold is APC-based journal publication. Green is a subscription journal, but you put it on a preprint server. The problem with green, as I see it, is that people don't know where to look. So again, that's not India specific, but if you, as a journalist, search for a journal article, you go to the journal web page. You might not be aware that there is another copy of essentially the same article somewhere else. These days, because of PubMed, you might find PubMed in your Google results, but typically you won't find archive or bioarchive there, unless you're lucky. So you don't know that there is an option. And this is particularly funny in the case of various Indian Academy of Science journals. These are all platinum open access. There is no APC, and the articles are open access on the Academy's website. But they have a partnership with Springer, where Springer republishes the same journals against a subscription or a per article charge of something like 50 or 60 euros, if I remember right. So you are looking for an article, you go to Springer's page. Springer gives you no indication that this article is also available on the Academy's page. Instead, they will happily charge you 60 euros to read one article. So I think one of the things we do need is more awareness on all sides that green open access is an option. We need to push back against the author pays gold open access model, but search for and suggest alternatives, because publishing does cost money. PLOS and all are not mercenary publishers. And eLife, for example, started off as Platinum OA. They did not have APCs at the beginning. Then they found they couldn't sustain it. Why can't we find ways to sustain open access without APCs, either via a community membership model or governments getting together and funding such initiatives? Why can't the Indian government, this idea has been popped up again and again, why can't we start a Platinum OA journal that is not a patriotic initiative? It is not like Indians should publish there. It should be world-class journal, and where anybody in the world would want to publish there because it's a good place and you don't have to pay. And I think that's a worthwhile ambition that India is in a position to achieve if we just have the mind. And ideally, we could collaborate with other South Asian countries and in fact with the global South in putting something like that out. So yeah, I probably run out my 5 minutes. The one last thing I wanted to mention was open textbooks, which I think putting an emphasis on that. Again, the movement on that is coming from the West, but it's very laudable. Sites like OpenStax and so on, which in some cases have very high quality textbooks, whereas otherwise textbooks cost over $100. Typically, it's kind of unaffordable to Indian students. So Xerox shops have a field day in charging you. So I think to enable grassroots science, let's say, or science at the less privileged universities and colleges, we should also have an open textbook and open education movement. And that's something, again, all these countries can think about together, including in local languages. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rahul, for taking out a lot of points. I will now go to Professor Tariq, but before going to that, to Professor Tariq, I have this question, because there has already been so much of discussion that community should do something. In India also, this discussion has been running around, but nothing has happened so far. On the other hand, I think it's not just India, globally, scientists or researchers, professors, everybody's career progression is very much tied to their publication. Where do they publish and how many they publish, and especially a prestigious journal, which is run by the commercial publishers. So how do you see that we can, and how do we can overcome all this, because we don't have any alternative at this point. So even, for example, as Rahul has given the example in disciplinary context, so for example, biomedical or a lot of part of biology, that most of the journals are now APC based. So it feels like it's a very complicated situation. So where do you see the opportunities here, or even the barriers as well, to get to a non-APC based model? Because so far, only Latin America had success to some extent, not other places. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, Professor Siddharthan very rightly pointed out that, he tried to counter the argument of the APC burden, but it's like I think it very much depends on the country, and as Professor Siddharthan mentioned, the fact that India has a good number of very high quality institutions which are well funded, which subscribe to these journals at their rates, that has actually made things much different for India than for Bangladesh or even Nepal, because Bangladesh is like Nepal has been going down this road of where we had some free access from Research for Life, and then we had some access from heavily discounted access. That was the only thing we could afford, and the publishers actually in the end they did allow heavy discounts for our country, which is sometimes difficult to get for India because of this heterogeneity. Because there is a group that can afford, and there is money around. So what the other argument actually against author pays is that it creates these perverse incentives because when you, Professor Siddharthan already alluded to the issue of predatory journals, and that is, in my view, I mean, author pays open access is kind of the, one of the root causes that, that allowed predatory journals to appear. And it's not just predatory journals, but I was in this working group of IAP that recently published a report on predatory journals and conferences. And what we observed is that we, rather than this binary classification of predatory and non-predatory journals, we need to look at predatory practices. And these predatory practices actually are creeping in even into the legitimate journals. So you will find them, doing different things that are not quite all right. I mean, and gradually it becomes smeared into a spectrum where there are journals which are very much well known, well established, but you find in them practices that are of predatory nature, and this is another thing. So I mean, Momita asked this question of where do we look for alternatives? It is a difficult question. I mean, what do we do now? Actually, this author pays has made this difficult because it's difficult for authors to come together to fight for something. When it was the institutions fighting for lowering subscriptions, you can build a consortium, you can negotiate like that. But now it has to be like in India, there is this movement for the UGC trying to get into some deal, which is like a publish and read agreement. So it pays both for the APCs and as well as for the subscription. So if you have something that well organized, then you can do that. Actually, green open access should be the long-term goal, but in the intermediate time, in the intermediate period, interim period, I think we should really look forward, look for coming together and trying to form these types of coalitions, working together, negotiating together, pushing together. Otherwise, the problem with APCs is that they can just run away with APCs. For subscriptions, you have to sell. It had to get in underneath someone's budget, the country's budget, something like that. But with APCs, it's like every individual fighting for himself, and there is no one. There is no fight. You are out there on your own. So I think that's where we need to. If institutions get together, countries get together. That's what happened with. There is this initiative called Scope 3. Scope 3 is in particle physics. It happened that all the universities around the world that subscribe to particle physics journals, they came together and they said, okay, we spend this much money for subscribing to particle physics journals. We put this in a pot, you bid for this, and we will pay you this money to make your journals open access. So they call it a sponsored open access. That's one model that can work, but you need to come together. It's very difficult for humanities communities to come together. There are initiatives. So there are some models, Subscribe to Open and Open Library of Humanities and things like that are going on. These are mostly experimental. I would also like to go to this issue that Professor Siddharthan mentioned on open source software, because I was also involved in an initiative where we looked at global access to research software, because that was another barrier for us. And what we noticed is that really open source software, should have been taken up much more with much greater enthusiasm in Bangladesh, in countries like Bangladesh or in our countries, but it hasn't. You will find all the open source enthusiasts in the developed countries, but not much here. And the only major research software that we found to be open source is R. But apart from that, there were no big good examples of major open source research software. There are supporting software, but not exactly research software that has been taken up. So that needs a major push. We need to encourage our users to go for open source, to look for options, even if there is an initial hurdle, we need to overcome that. And I also agree with Professor Bhandari particularly for Bangladesh. I think the words that she mentioned of the LIC to LMIC transition, the institutional inertia, the political will, the awareness of political level, the funding issues. I mean, these are very, very major issues in our country as well. So I think these are the major obstacles that I can mention in the available time. So I think I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tariq, for putting out the barriers. I think I have one question definitely that actually all of you can take it up in a way that first of all, that we always say the commercial publisher doesn't bring anything on the table because they're just making a lot of profit out of it. But then why don't but still when it comes to publishing, we go for those options, because for example in India also most of the prominent researchers or anyone does not really go and publish in the Indian journal, which Professor Siddharthan already mentioned. Those are open access, at least from the academic sides. We all go for publishers like Elsevier, Springer or Wiley. Then how can we avoid them at this point? Can we really have an option to avoid them? And also, can we really really go for the green open access as well? Because they have certain embargoes, which goes for 1 to 2 years. So yeah, Professor Tariq, please, you can.
Now, I think there are really two approaches. I mean, I never recommend, cutting out a stakeholder. You cannot ignore a stakeholder. So they are in the game and they do provide a service. But right now they have ownership. If we have something called the scientific publishing industry or the academic publishing industry, then it is owned by them. It should be owned by academia. We need to regain ownership. But I also would like to say that we need to take the publishers as partners because they do add value. They do add value. I mean, I have really appreciated when I work with a good publisher, how my article gets enhanced, gets improved. The other approach is, when and I think Professor Siddharthan already alluded to one of the examples where like eLife started off trying to go on a non-commercial route, but then they had to. So there is another very good example in physics, for example, Journal of High Energy Physics, because nowadays we can almost typeset our article very much in publishing almost in a article like format. We can do it ourselves as authors. So physicists just started saying that why do we bother about publishers? Let's do it ourselves. So that's the archive. There is no involved. So Journal of High Energy Physics and Journal of Cosmology and Astroparticle Physics were two very good examples, two leading journals that came out like this. Let's do it ourselves. But in the end, we saw that JHEP went to IOP, then they went to Springer as well. And now JHEP it's still open access, though there is some method of collecting some money somewhere. But it's like they valued the input that publishers bring in. So what I think is, if we can get out of this author-pays model, the publishers, we can force them to, we have to stand together to force them to bring the barriers down, either in terms of APCs or in other things. But we really need to regain ownership. We have really lost it to them, and that is the main problem.
Yeah, thank you. That's really actually summarizes the problem that we face, especially for the early career researchers, because their career so much depends on publishing into those high impact journal, for example. I mean, if I can use the term high impact, but it's something which we can't avoid. So I think Professor Bhandari, you wanted to make some intervention.
Yeah, thank you, Momita. So I completely agree with Tariq, and I really like your questions, because though we know like there are open access journal from our local level, but we are forced to, or we are intended to publish on those established journal, or as you said, the high impact factor journal. So I think to avoid those things is like I completely agree with Tariq. And one more thing is we have to uplift the quality of the publication from our level, like the journals which we are publishing locally and they are open access. I think there is some question in the chat box as well about the quality. So for improving the quality, first of all, like there should be the investment. And I think even those journals, like we have to collaborate with them as well, and or we can make the institutional subscription base. So if we try to improve the quality by the good peer review and the monitoring and evaluation of those journals, because there are many journals coming up. So one issue is the predatory journals. There are sometimes, like there is no clear criteria about the predatory journal or the punishment as well, because I'm involved in the online research writing course in the authorate for 4-5 years, and we always discuss about the predatory journal, and always we get the question why there is no punishment system, or who punish like those predatory journals. But there is no any policies in the or the punishment system as well. And sometimes our local journals, which has not good quality, often mistaken about the predatory as well. So those kind of clear demarcation is not also there. That's why like the researcher, we are, like the tempted to publish in the journal which is already established, and we try to some like the way we are, if we get the funding like it Tariq mentioned, like the author payment based, individual based negotiation with the journal or those things. But so if we do the institution level collaboration and uplift the quality of our local journal, then I think we will be, researcher scientists will be more inclined to publish and those locally or Southeast and regional based journal as well, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating it. I mean, honestly, we are discussing these same issues for so many years, but we have not been able to make any changes. But I hope that since we are discussing that UNESCO also provided the open science recommendation, maybe now we can actually come together and do something about it. So I will now go back again to another question that I had, is that, so for again, as I have mentioned before as well, we are talking too much on the knowledge product or knowledge dissemination. But what about the knowledge creation itself? So one of the major goals for us to organize the conference, and as well as trying to build a network, calling it as an ocean, that how we can bring the researchers of South Asia together, to even in not only knowledge dissemination, but not for knowledge creation as well. So how do you envision that can go? And what are the challenges or opportunities do you see that we can make a change as a region, not as an individual countries? Because since many of the challenges or the problems are very similar for these countries, if not every domain, but there are many areas where collaboration can happen. So how do you see that collaboration? How do you see the challenges? How do you see the opportunities? So this question can go, yeah, Rahul can start. Rahul, please.
Yeah, so I feel knowledge creation is basically what scientists do, and knowledge dissemination, I guess, is, so I guess your question is more like, how can we leverage open science to enhance knowledge creation?
Yeah, enhance knowledge creation, not entirely, because so far we are doing this creation process in very isolation, we feel. Even society is many cases not involved. So it's probably, yes, we look into in a very basic science way, so if I call it.
That's an interesting point, and it comes back to something I mentioned about open textbooks earlier, but it would not just be open textbooks. We should So for example, Wikipedia has made it easy for anyone to read up about scientific concepts, which by and large are not terribly wrong, even if they are sometimes not, thoroughly vetted, what you find in Wikipedia, but it's mostly pretty good. You have all these online learning platforms and Coursera and so on. So we have a complete change in how education is being done. People no longer depend on schools and colleges. They can get their knowledge elsewhere. So that is one thing open science should take advantage of. There are various citizen science initiatives in, for example, census taking of wildlife, and there are various attempts at like folding at home for making Android apps to help scientists do protein folding. But there's, I don't know how much the engagement with the public is. So we have seen how COVID has kind of changed the practice of science, and somehow the number of people who suddenly became epidemiologists of whatever quality in the last 2 years is mind-boggling. And but some of those people were good, and some of those papers were really valuable. A lot of interesting research has been done, but I think the interesting thing is the level of discussion and the level of public interest in reading, in many cases, original science articles, and many journals turning off their paywalls for COVID-related work, which they intended to do to help scientists read the literature, but a lot of public was also accessing it. So these are positive lessons that we can draw from COVID. Now back to the South Asian context, we have these many endemic diseases to our part of the world, from mosquito-borne diseases to sanitation related or generally public health, which are common to all of our countries. And I think we should draw lessons from how COVID was tackled as a global effort and look at how we can similarly engage scientists and the public in finding solutions to some of these other things, whether it's tuberculosis or malaria or whichever. I'd like to hear from the other panelists on this. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Professor Tariq, if you have any comment to make on this? Professor, yeah.
Maybe I'll wait just.
Can you?
Yes, well, when it comes to things like citizen science and stuff like that, I think there is scope, and this is something that is not well organized in our countries. I agree with Professor Siddharthan on the issues of open textbooks and things like that. We can make much greater use of these. In fact, within our South Asian scenario, there could be, there is a lot more scope of sharing in terms of other things as well, in terms of software, in terms of hardware, in terms of access to research labs. If we can have a bit more openness, then I think we can also benefit from each other. That is another thing that we can talk about. Sorry, I think I also missed the point of indigenous knowledge, which is also important in our countries. That is something that kind of has been added on to UNESCO's in UNESCO's latest mandate, and that is another issue that perhaps that is an area where our subcontinent can contribute. For example, if you talk about even Ayurveda and things like that, I mean, there is a lot of indigenous knowledge that is actually not really there. It's not there in a curated manner, in a manner that there is I think there is a lot of scope for collaboration in that area as well.
I have a question there actually, as you mentioned, the indigenous knowledge. If we see in the society or even among the scientists also, there is a hesitancy based on the indigenous knowledge, because there is an idea that these knowledge are not scientific in nature. So as long as it does not conform with the laws of science, this knowledge should not be taken seriously. So the scientific validity of these knowledge systems are always been questioned. So as a scientist, what would be your comment on this?
I think, I would like to, I would like to see more working with them, working with indigenous knowledge systems, and trying to see them, properly validated. But sometimes we are throwing away a lot of value just by saying they have not been validated. Of course, they need validation. That is true. But for this, citizen science alone will not achieve much. Citizen science can serve as if it feeds into proper science, and then it gets validated in science proper, then I think it will really, pay the benefits or pay the dividends. And the same applies to, age-old indigenous knowledge that remains scattered out there sometimes. And I think not all will be validated. That's for sure. But I think we will find gems out there.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for making this point, because the reluctance to use this knowledge system definitely exists, but maybe we need to put more effort to mainstream them or get them validated is probably something it's important. But as if we look into the UNESCO open science recommendation, it does not really recommend it in that way. It says that those knowledge system has its own value, and probably it does not, there is no prescription to validate them to science. So do you have any comment on that? Because in that, it looks like in that recommendation that it's an existing knowledge system, and they should also have certain freedoms to express their knowledge, if I may explain it that way. So do you have then a reservation for it? If it is not validated scientifically, if I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it should be validated scientifically, and there are efforts going on. One of my colleagues here at IISc has actually made a database of phytochemicals in Indian medicinal plants, but as of now, it is just a very exhaustive database of the chemicals that are found there and their known pharmacological interactions from the literature. And this can be a resource for example, the pharma industry, or for researchers working on developing new treatments. But it has to be done scientifically, I fully agree. But I think, yes, the point is that we do have a lot of indigenous knowledge that can be exploited, and not just in medicine, but maybe also in construction techniques, in engineering. How do you build houses that are suitable to our climate? In forestation, in agricultural practices. So I think all these things should be taken seriously. Relating to that, if I may make one more slight digression, there is an elephant in the room that nobody has talked about. The word does not appear in the UNESCO document anywhere, and that is patents. So UNESCO report actually says something like one of the goals is promoting materials that are in the public domain and existing open licensing schemes, copyright and other intellectual property exceptions for research, work subject to other intellectual property protection on the condition that it basically does that include patents? Because patents are, in my view, a block to research. And we have seen how Western companies have tried to patent turmeric and whatnot. So we can look at the ridiculous CRISPR circus, for example. CRISPR was discovered in 1988, I think. Most of the discoveries of how it actually helps bacteria fight phage infection were made by Moeka in, I think, the 90s. And it is like 2 decades of work until this CRISPR-Cas9 system was assembled, but then Buna and Charpentier on one side and the Broad Institute people on the other side fight about who should get patents for it. And why should anyone get patents for it? And is this something that and patents, unlike copyrights, are country specific. You need separate patents in the US and in India. Is this something that the Global South can fight about? And I think it's relevant also to the question of traditional knowledge and so on.
Yeah, actually, honestly, from when India had the response towards the open science recommendation at the beginning, we had raised this issue of patent, but I think in the final document, obviously, there is no clear mention how such thing will happen. So yeah, at least that is the elephant in room which has not been addressed. But coming back to your previous comment on that, there is this database of the phytochemicals that you were talking about. Now, my curiosity there is that since the data is now open domain and the pharma companies can take it up, let's say, and make medicine and then maybe even patent the thing. So how that can be tackled? Because now this is again another elephant in the room, I see. The data open domain, they take it up and then they even can patent.
This is very much a question my colleague Arjit is struggling with. So what he has done so far is that the database is copyrighted. So you cannot just copy the entire database and host it somewhere else. You can still access it and search for knowledge and get ideas from it. Nobody can copyright ideas. And so how do you? We're all in favor of open science, but how do you prevent it being locked up at a higher level? That's, I think, the kind of legal question that should worry all of us. And I think the CRISPR thing too is an example of that 20 years of basic science has ended up in a patent at the very last step. So
yeah, exactly. That's why I made this question, because we see that there are good thing about open science because we want to put the data for everyone to use, but then it can be, misused in a way. At least this can be commercialized. So there is also another place where probably researchers can come together to see what can be done. Yeah, we are coming to an end of this conversation. So before that, I will try to see if there are more questions. So far, I see only one question. That so it says
there are
that
two questions in the answered panel. You should probably revisit them also.
Yeah, exactly. So let me start with the open question, then we can go to the answered one. So it says that we have to focus our attention on quality of research from our researchers. A baseline study needs to be undertaken to assess how far lack of access to papers affects the quality. Even with open access, if you're just publishing without knowledge creation, we cannot contribute to science or technology. Well, it looks like more of a comment. So the person probably is trying to say that lack of access might not be that a very major issue. So what do you think? Maybe I can start with Professor Bhandari.
Yeah, I also think that is just a statement rather than a question. So I agree and disagree in somehow. I think lack of the quality should be there, but if there is no access and there is a quality, so how can we use those quality papers? So we should focus on the quality, but access should be there. So after publishing the good papers, good quality papers in if we are publishing in the international journal and the paywall journal and nobody can access, then what is the use of those studies doing locally? So I think open access is a major issue, but we have to give the equal attention to the quality. So not only working on I think I already mentioned the open access as well as the quality publication also does matter on this.
Okay, I would take up another question with you because that's probably very much aligned with your field of study. So it says that One Health approach, the major problem is all stakeholders involved in it does not share data among themselves. Then how can we assure open science practices in One Health? So what is your opinion on it? How do you see the One Health?
Yeah, I completely agree with the question. in that, like, we have to share, like I think Professor Tariq and Rahul also mentioned that, like, if we share our database software and everything, then only we can work collaboratively, or we can get benefited from those things. So in one way we are saying the One Health approach, everything is there, but we are not sharing among each others, and it is the fragmented approach. So I think to be if we have to use the One Health approach, like the adopt that, then there should be the transparency, and with, of course, the patent and copyright, everything would be there, but dissemination of the knowledge should be there. Then only we can achieve that goal, I guess. Yeah.
So I think that this is a challenge that we all are facing, that the data is not being shared. So my question to Professor Tariq would be then, I mean, in high energy physics community, as he has mentioned, that sharing is very common, and also astrophysics community shares even the data. So what is that promoted them to adopt a culture of data sharing? And also, I would just like to add another punchline into it also, this question, because right now we see a lot of journals now making it almost mandated to share even the raw data. For example, many of the Springer journal is doing so. So do you think that would solve the problem? So this is the two questions coupled together. So
yeah. I think it really is a matter of culture, as I think Professor Rahul Siddharthan mentioned. Culture is discipline specific culture. So it's something that just happens within that ecosystem, and it's something that is rarely shared. So I think we need to look out for the best bits of the cultures from other disciplines and try to take those up, because I mean I have always found the high energy physics community to be just very open. For example, I mean I don't know if you are aware of this, but usually in high energy physics, in many places, it's like the author's names come in alphabetical order. So my name is always at the end, but it's like I always found it like that, because they were like that. The culture is like that. So we don't, and they don't care so much about whether it's a preprint or a journal article. And in fact, people are always reading articles on the archive first. And people never read the journal articles. They cite the journal reference, but they read it on the archive 6 months before it has been published in a journal. So that's kind of the culture that happens there. And that's why they have been able to come together for these consortium and things like that, working against, making things available so easily. So I think it's a matter of culture, and it's also perhaps I don't think I should disregard other issues. I mean, there are sometimes issues of how much commercialization is possible with the data. So fields like medicine and biology and even solar energy, they are much more commercializable data. Here the data, petroleum engineering. So people are much more secretive about it. I mean, that's not unusual. And I think it's a matter of culture, really. I don't think I have another answer, because unless the culture changes, it will not. I mean, I don't see things, being. I don't think this can be changed by, regulation or anything else.
Okay, I think that then regulation cannot change it for sure, and it's a matter of culture, and percolating that culture to other discipline might be very difficult. So my final questions to Professor Siddharthan for this session will be that is the journal making any difference, because we see now journals asking for change or depositing data. So do we see it that, let's say, for example, biomedical sciences, because of the journal is pushing something, a change is coming?
In biomedical sciences, I would say definitely the change happened 15 to 20 years ago, because it is not just the journals. It was an agreement, that 4 Probability agreement that I mentioned. Everybody adopted it, from journals to funding agencies. And researchers voluntarily, maybe initially not voluntarily, but a lot of the big data providers actually took the lead in doing this. And then people will ask, when the Human Genome Project are sharing their data, why can't you share your data? And so essentially, a lot of this data used to be, still is maybe, you have to sort of read something that says, I agree not to do any genome scale analysis of this data. And in some cases, I will, before writing a manuscript based on this data, I will contact some contact person to see whether they are okay with it. So, so I myself have, access such data and contacted people like that. It's so very transparent. But at the point of submitting to a journal, I mean, I'm talking about data that has not even been written up yet. Somebody sequences a new genome and puts that sequence on NCBI for everybody else to see, but with this kind of disclaimer there. And everybody else is polite enough to respect the disclaimer. But as you say, when the journal receives your manuscript, at that point, they for sure want your data. In many cases, data is already out there, but even if it is, they want it. I think everybody has to join in, journals, funders, and the scientists themselves have to see that it's a good thing to do. But it does help the journals insist on it.
Okay, so I think that as you mentioned, that everybody in this ecosystem has to come together. We cannot tell like we don't like you, don't take it, but or put you in this ecosystem, but rather if we can negotiate and try to make it more reasonable for all of us, this will help a lot, I feel. So I think we are almost at the end, but I would really like to ask at least a quick comment from all of the participants today, so all the panelists. So I start with Rahul. So what would be your end remarks for today's panel?
Well, my end remark is that open science is a large goal. It's part of open knowledge, and the path is slow, and different fields are at different points in that path. The internet will take us there because there is a saying from the early days of the internet that knowledge wants to be free. And when journals erect their paywalls, Sci-Hub comes along to take it down. I think things are moving towards more openness, and we can push it along, but we will get there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So Professor Bhandari, over to you for your end remarks for the panel.
Thank you, Momita. And what I feel is like I wanted to say, and now you asked me. So I feel like we are discussing about the open science, like in such conference, and I have seen like in Nepal also there was some conference. So I think now the time has come. We form some South Asian Open Science Society, because in health we usually have like the Diabetic Society, hypertension. So that work collaboratively in the region and develop some plan policies or advocacy together. And why not the next step, like the conference organizer or any kind, we form an open science society based in South Asia and work collaboratively and advocacy together in different countries and have some policies and advance in that.
Yeah, thank you for this very nice idea. We would definitely, we are trying this direction, and we would definitely, it looks like everybody wants something like that. We'll definitely work towards it. So now over to Professor Tariq for your final closing remark for the panel.
Thank you. I think, okay, I mean, yes, of course, we should collaborate. And I think, yes, internet is taking us in certain directions, which will sometimes, guide us, for example. But I also think that with the developments, with the author pays model, open access is actually going in a wrong direction. And we will see worse days ahead. This is something I think I need to warn you, because maybe after that we will see better days. I hope so. But I mean, in the immediate future, I think we are going to see more difficult days, and only those who are fortunate to be in very centers of excellences or some highly privileged institution, they will not feel it. But apart from that, everyone will feel the bite. So I think we need to get our act together and reclaim academic publishing. Apart from that, in other places, I think, yes, we should try to work together and move forward in the right direction. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful end remark, because as we say that we have to take this in our hand, because we cannot play by the rule book of the publishers, because it is going to hurt us a lot. So maybe collaborative infrastructure for publishing, I mean, obviously they are also part of this ecosystem. So maybe definitely still people will publish, or there will be a need to publish with bigger publisher, but still at least so that we are not in a situation that we cannot even publish at all, because with the author pay model, as you mentioned, that it is going to be a barrier for researchers of this region. So maybe we need more collaborative approach, or at least publishing platform for our countries where we can publish without paying, which also Rahul mentioned that there is a lot of discussion in India, nothing has happened, but it is very nice to see that in Nepal and Bangladesh, this thing has taken a shape, publishing platform. So thank you. We are already 1 minute extra on our time limit, but yeah, it was a very engaging discussion. And thank you to our panelists, and also thanks to the participants. I hope that they have enjoyed the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Very much. It was a pleasure.
Over to you, Pragya.
Thank you, Momita, and thank you to all the panelists. That was a very engaging and a very enlightening panel discussion. And now we will take a short 10 minutes break before we move on to the flash talks, where our participants who had submitted their abstracts would give short presentations on their abstracts. And so yeah, we'll see everyone back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Yeah. I hope everyone managed to get some break after a very long panel discussion session, a very engaging one. So now we will quickly move on to the flash talks, for which I would like to invite my colleague and co-lead and co-organizer of the event, Dr. Gautam Sharma. He will be moderating the flash talks. Gautam, can you please take over from here?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pragya. And am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Welcome back. And we are now moving on to the penultimate session of the day, and we will have flash talk by the participants. So just to give a short description to everyone, we also invited papers from different scholars and everyone who are working in this area. We received a very good response, and we were, due to paucity of time, we were able to select only 10 papers for this conference. And today we are going to have 5 of them give a brief talk on their completed or ongoing projects. So we will have 8 minutes per presentation. So all the participants who are presenting today are requested to please follow this timeline and finish the presentation within the stipulated time. I'll be keeping a track of the time and give you a reminder after 5 minutes, after which you are requested to please finish your talk in next 3 minutes. So without taking much time, I'll invite the first presenter of the day, Mr. Anup Das. And the title of his paper is Enhancing India's Open Science Infrastructure, a case study of iSTEM portal, with his co-author Ravi Shankar Giri. Over to you, Dr. Das.
We can hear you, but if you can speak a bit loud, it will be helpful. Dr. Das, can you please speak a bit loud because we can't hear.
Okay. Is it okay now?
It's a problem with your microphone. I think maybe you can try without it.
Okay, okay. Is it okay now?
It's better, but still it's not very loud.
Anyway, that title is shown. You know about UNESCO recommendation on open science, and open science infrastructure is one of the key elements, and open science infrastructure refers to shared research infrastructures like virtual infrastructure or physical infrastructure, including nature, scientific equipment, or sets of equipments and infrastructures that are needed to support science and serve the needs of different communities. So we know about the communities that we also have communities across the country who are also located in non-metropolitan areas like in small cities or towns. They are also our researcher communities, including that grassroots innovators and also that different engineers or technology developers who are attached with MSME, micro and small scale industries. So they are also our user community. And open innovation test beds, including incubators, accessible research facilities, open license stewards, they are also part of the infrastructure, and open science infrastructure open community building efforts, which are crucial for the long-term sustainability, and therefore should be non-profit and guarantee permanent and unrestricted access to all public and largest extent possible. So we have our public institutions which are located in different cities across the country, and they are also having different research equipment infrastructures available with them, which are funded by the public money, that is taxpayers' money, or maybe that is those are funded by different funding agencies like Department of Science and Technology or Department of Biotechnology or similar other institutions. They funded procurement of those expensive research infrastructure. So those infrastructure can be accessed by other people, like other people in the researchers communities, or optimal usage of the available resources. So that's why we have one Indian Science, Technology and Engineering Facilities Map, or ISTEM. So that is one web portal, and which was launched by our Prime Minister of India on 3rd January 2020 in the 107th Indian Science Congress. So what is the vision or mission of the portal? So that vision is to have a national and regional inventory of resources, matching users with the resources required in an efficient and transparent manner. This can lead in research and development productivity and greatly enhance the effectiveness of public investment. So that is the mission or vision of the portal. And the purpose of this portal is that the gateway for researchers to locate the specific facilities they need for their R&D work and identify the one that is either located closest to them or available the soonest. So we may have multiple equipments in different places, but those are not readily available. So we need to identify the resource which are which is readily available. So this ISTEM portal will help in that. And what is the rationale of the this portal? That what the years the government of India has been funding research and development efforts at academic institutions and research institutions. However, the mapping of facilities based on availability and distance were not available. The portal aims at bridging the gap by converging information on facilities developed through government support, and researchers were qualified to utilize the facilities for research work. So that is the rationale. And for the participating agencies, this project is funded by Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, and also other institutions like the Department of Science and Technology, Ministry of Education, and University Grant Commission. They are also participating in this particular web portal. And this web portal is managed by Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. And we can see the statistics of researchers and institutions. We have seen that around 25,000 recruiters are enlisted on this portal, and around 1,909 institutes are listed, and about 6,000 ISTEM users are there, but utilizing or planning to utilize the equipments in this institution across the country. So this portal is searchable, and we have to search by any key term. Like I search by scanning electron microscope or SCM, and we have this kind of result. All India 191 equipment found from 131 institutions, and I filtered that search result for Delhi, and I found that 10 equipment from 7 institutions for the scanning electron microscope, this particular equipment. And we can see that there are many filtering possibilities there, like we can search by distance filter, or make, or model, or category of institutions like Central University, or CSIR lab, or DST lab kind of things, and funding agencies funded that research. So this way we can see further. And also you can see at the left corner of the web page that some institutions' names are there. So we can click on any of the institutions' name, and you will see that where it is located. Like I clicked on Jawaharlal Nehru University, and this is located. These two equipments are available there, and this way I further studied the kind of equipments are available. I studied IIT Delhi, and we see that that usage rate is not given on the portal. So, but some other informations are also available, like which is the department where this equipment is located. The Department of Textile Technology is this equipment is located at this department, and this equipment was funded by DST, government of India. So you can see further description of the equipment. So the conclusion that equipment by the search by equipment name is possible at ISTEM portal. However, search by institution name is not possible on ISTEM portals. If I want to see how many equipments are available from JNU or IIT Delhi, I cannot see. I have to search by equipment only. I cannot search by institution. I can filter down at the institutional level, but only for the particular equipment only. And usage rate of the enlisted equipment is not available in most of the cases. I have seen many of the equipment usage rate, how much is charged by the institution, are not available on the portal. And this IISc portal is also providing some other facilities like scientific software or R&D software which are available on the portal like Consulate, MATLAB, LabVIEW, and Autodesk. So these are the portal available for the registered users of the IISc. So there was another project funded by mapping of scientific equipment. So there is one database of equipment supported under extramodal R&D projects and research infrastructure programs. So this project was implemented by the Energy Resource Institute or TERI at New Delhi, and there is one website equipment NSTMIS DST.org. This is searchable program. So you can search by name of the equipment or institution name, and you will get the list of equipments available in that particular institution. So content of the above database that is which is developed by TERI can also be IISc portal, and the usage of IISc portal by the educators or remote schools, senior secondary schools, or grassroots innovators, startups, and engineers or developers at the MSME can be encouraged. So different advocacy tools and also campaigning, so we can make these resources available to the educators, innovators, startups, and MSME participants. So this way we can promote our open science infrastructure across the country, and we can also invite our
Okay, Dr. Das, we are running out of time now. Okay, please wind up your presentation.
Yeah. So we can also open up our resources to the SAARC or South Asian participants, so that open science in South Asia can be enlarged through these portals. This is my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Das, for that presentation. And we'll now move on to our next presenter, Ms. Tanya Isar. She'll be presenting a work, an ongoing project of hers, Integrated Water Resources Assessment of Udaipur District, where she's the first author, and along with her co-authors Nidhi Sherawat and Geetika Goswami. Over to you, Tanya. Oh, I request my team to please upload the slides of Tanya. Tanya, are you there? We can't hear you. Okay, we'll move on to our next participant till then. So Radhika Trikha, and the her paper is Stimulating Open Innovation Culture by Creating End-to-End Virtual Integrated Innovation Platforms. Radhika, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, I've unmuted myself. Can you just confirm my screen is up?
Yeah, screen is also visible and you are audible. Please go on.
All right, perfect. All right. Very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, OSAN Conference 2022, to give me an opportunity to deliberate on the topic how virtual integrated innovation platforms can stimulate the open innovation culture in the country. I'm Dr. Radhika Tariq. I'm working as a senior policy fellow with DST Center for Policy Research at IISc Bangalore. I am hosted jointly by Department of Science and Technology, New Delhi, and one of the other Center for Policy Research at Punjab University, Chandigarh. So I would be presenting my study inputs on stimulating open innovation culture by creating end-to-end virtual integrated innovation platform. Moving further, why first of all we need to create an integrated platform? The idea behind having an integrated platform came from one of the major research focus area for my senior policy fellowship, that is on how building system interconnectedness. And to start with, I just want to introduce what I mean by a system interconnectedness. So when we talk about science, technology, and innovation ecosystem, it mainly comprises of many stakeholders associated with science, technology, and innovation. I like just to give an idea, I've divided them into two primarily sector. One is the public sector and the private sector that comprise of further formal and informal sector. But just to give an idea what kind of stakeholders are associated with any science, technology, innovation ecosystem, it's mainly the government bodies, the research funding agencies which are associated, then all the higher education institute, national research laboratories which are associated. Then there are certain public sector entities or public sector enterprises which are being set up. Then when we come to the private sector, we have industries, we have industrial association industries comprising of MSMEs, large corporates, small enterprises. Then we have certain educational research institutes which are primarily based on the private funding. They come under the private sector. Then through the informal sector, we have many grassroots innovators and many other National Science Foundation, like one of the supported public and private, both are supporting that organization. And so on NGOs which are working towards this level, they contribute to the formation of STI ecosystem. And if we ask how innovation ecosystem can be reinvigorated in the country, how it can be stimulated, one of the criteria is how well we are interconnected with each other, how well the linkages are being made between different stakeholders of the system. So this is the idea what is percolated through system interconnectedness, that we are going to bring all the stakeholders on one single platform so they can make the necessary linkages and they can have all kind of interconnectedness for the utilization of better resources. So this idea of system interconnectedness further gave an idea how this system interconnectedness can be formulated in our country. So having an integrated virtual platforms is one of the best way. Anoop has already talked about iSTEM portal. That was one of the initiatives that linked the researchers to the resources which are being available for carrying out the R&D. So taking that one step forward, how further we can match make the solution providers, the knowledge providers with the knowledge solution and knowledge takers can be carried out. So this idea of connecting all the stakeholders further lead to why we need an open innovation culture in the country. So if we have to connect different stakeholder, multiple entities together, we need to provide them with some facilitated platform through which they can connect with each other, although they are sitting at different institutions in different geographies, how better we can connect with them. We are talking about interdisciplinary study, we are talking about multidisciplinary study, transdisciplinary study, how well they can be connected, sectors be connected, stakeholders be connected. So at a holistic level, when we talk about, we are proposing there should be a creation of some end-to-end integrated virtual platform for the same. So what is the main aim? Main aim is to build an open innovation culture where the knowledge providers and the knowledge solution takers, they can connect with each other, and with the better resource utilization, a knowledge can be shared. Simultaneously, a comprehensive database of all the resources and the teams which are working on specific sectors, on specific areas can be compiled. Then very essential, a matchmaking through such virtual platforms can be carried out. We have facilitative entities that are being developed in educational institutes, in research institutes, such as we have technology transfer offices, we have industry academia cells. Accordingly, these are the physical entities that are being set up. But if we have to go beyond the level of the institution, why cannot just explore the formation of a kind of a virtual platform for making a matchmaking? Then how we can pool the resources and how better fund utilization, more importantly, how we can generate the impact out of it. But there are certain challenges on which we are deliberating on, like how a transparency and accessibility issue can be addressed through such a virtual platform. Then how the vast amount of information that is available, we have like so many research institutes, so many higher education institutes, the information that we have, how it can be codified, how it can be curated, how it can be made accessible, and how it can be managed, so that when we say a matchmaking has to be carried out, how well it can be managed and how well it can be a visible platform, not only for the urban population, but also for the remote population, for the rural population, for the very small players, the MSMEs. How can it be very visible for them and how it can bring their visibility? And then how multiple entities on similar project or similar technology area can be connected. So with this idea, we propose that there should be formation of end-to-end integrated virtual platform, but that's not a simple task. It requires loads of initiatives, loads of activities that have been carried out. ISTEM is one of the starting platform that can be explored on that. But more than that, as already Anup shared with you all, what are the challenges and what are the drawbacks that are being associated with ISTEM? So ISTEM is mainly connecting researchers with the R&D resources. But here in virtual integrated platform, we are integrating all aspects of the innovation ecosystem, starting up with what kind of human resources are associated, what are the financial contributions, where the finance is coming from, how it is being operated, what kind of a manufacturing. Manufacturing also goes how that technology would be developed, how it would be piloted, and then more importantly, how it would be procured. So all these attributes, functional attributes, have to be addressed in the virtual platform. For that, we require a very strong system for data integration. So we have just started studying about how such kind of a virtual platform that will connect the all levels and all functional attributes of the innovation be connected. And with that aspect, we also studied how our education system be exposed towards this kind of a virtual platform, where we land up into a technology integration models right at the education, how a content knowledge, that is mainly the content related to our science and technology and innovation attributes, be connected with the other innovation technology tools to formulate such kind of a technological platform that will integrate all aspects of the innovation ecosystem, and how our education resources be utilized for that. So these are certain things that we are considering if we talk about creation of such kind of a virtual platform. With this, I'll come to the conclusion why we need such kind of an open science framework and why we are stressing on the virtual platform. As you all must be aware that India has come out with the 5th National Science Technology Innovation Policy draft. Right now, that draft is publicly available, and it has a one dedicated chapter on open science that talks about how an open science culture be developed in India. And for that, the two prominent recommendations that they have provided. One is the creation of a national STI observatory. So I'm discussing about the virtual integrated end-to-end platform to be created. So national STI observatory is an overlook for that. So National STI Observatory will encompass all the information related to what kind of financial schemes, what kind of programs, what grants, incentives, what kind of an R&D and innovation projects are going on. And then they would be together coordinated and organized so that the best resource utilization and the engagement with the stakeholders carried out. And for this, we need to follow a proper open science framework, and where this model of a virtual platform will fit in if we make it a mandatory for each organization, each stakeholder, whosoever is involved in STI, to give that information according to Open Science framework, we can have that one single umbrella as a virtual platform where we can get that information, we can get that open data, open access, citizen science. Of course, there would be problems related to what kind of an information will go to the public, what kind of information related to IT would be available or not. So these are certain challenges that we need to deliberate. I'm really happy to mention here that Office of Principal Scientific Advisor have come out with a specialized portal where all the stakeholders who are dealing with sustainable technologies, addressing the sustainable development goals, they have come out with a portal called Manthan. It's very recently, it has been launched, not even a month has happened to it. I'll request everyone to go through this portal, and it's a very good model where you can directly do a matchmaking exercise. And if you're working in this particular field, how can you show your expression of interest, what all can happen, then how industry can pose their problems and look for the solution. So it's a very user-friendly portal, and this is one step forward that we are going, how to create a virtual platform integrating specifically for sustainable development goals, but we have to move forward and encompass all the thematic sectors and all the stakeholders in the whole process. With this, I end my presentation and really want to thank you all for giving me an opportunity, and I would to thank my mentoring and financial stimulating in organization DST-CPR at IISc Bangalore and DST-CPR at PU Chandigarh. Thank you once again. I'll look forward to the questions, and in the chat we can discuss more about it. Yep. Thank you, Gautam.
Thank you, Radhika. That's really a good presentation. However, also it brings out many questions like how it will tackle the questions of patents and other intellectual property when it's open. But we'll discuss it some at a later stage, maybe, because we have to give time to other participants. Maybe we'll try again once with Nidhi. Are you please try to share a presentation from your side, or please check if you are audible. So. I think Nidhi is not connected right now. Maybe we'll go to Anshuman Goyal. Anshuman, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So Anshuman, you load the slides from your end?
No, I can display the slides from my end.
Okay. So our next presenter is Anshuman. He has a co-authored paper with Dr. Sudeep Patra, and this title is Are Big Tech Algorithms Enemies of Open Science? A study of human algorithm interaction bias using quantum life frameworks, Karl Popper, and YouTube's recommendation algorithm. Over to you, Anshuman.
Thank you.
You'll have 8 to 10 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Kindly let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see. Please put it on the slide more.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let us start with the talk. So today, big tech algorithms and social media, they have become key to how scientific research is disseminated to various levels of the society. Their role is immense in promotion of open science. However, today we are asking the question, are big tech algorithms enemies of open science? Are they going against open science? Are they suppressing the scientific content on social media? And to answer this question, we will use the philosophy of Karl Popper. We will use quantum-like framework and analysis of YouTube's recommendation algorithm. So several studies, they have shown many biases when human interacts with the algorithm, and it together creates a kind of closed chamber. It's called an echo chamber around the individual. And this leads to various problems. This leads to radicalization in society, and it leads to several other problems. Therefore, we cannot have open science when we are having a closed social media. And why do we have this closed social media? Because of several biases like exposure effect, bandwagon effect, this echo chamber effect, filter bubble effect. Then there is obviously popularity bias. So it creates a kind of closed chamber because of all these societal biases as well as the biases between the human and the algorithm. That is why they create a kind of closed society. And when we are having a closed society, obviously we cannot expect to have open science. We will have closed science. Now, what do we mean by open society and open science? So how is open science related to open society? We can ask. Karl Popper, in his famous book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, he has criticized totalitarianism and holism, and he has shown that it is bad for advancement of science. It is also bad for open science. And many thinkers today, they are saying that we are now living in an algorithmic society. The society is dominated by algorithms, and it is dominated by human algorithm interaction bias. And that is why it reflects many totalitarian features. Therefore, we may be headed towards a closed science instead of open science. You know, open science is about democratization, it's about collaboration, it's about alliances. That's how we interpret open science. It's a different way of interpreting open science. Open science also requires active participation of citizens so that the science can really develop and prosper. And that requires an open society. As per Karl Popper, open society is an association of free individuals who make rational decisions for an enlightened life. And Popper, as I told you, he has criticized holism and totalitarianism, and he advances the idea of liberalism, self-determination, individual liberty, and thus he advances the idea of open science. However, as I have told you before, big tech algorithms, they are creating new forms of holism and totalitarianism. It is also called as techno-feudalism by many social science thinkers. And this is due to various human algorithm interactions that I've already told you about. All these different biases are there: exposure effect, bandwagon effect, echo chamber effect. Because of all these various kinds of biases and effects, we are having a closed society. Thus, we are having a closed science. And closed science is obviously bad for us, right? Because we want open science to flourish. So now we are using social laser framework. It is a quantum-like model. And this quantum-like model is actually a new paradigm that makes use of quantum physics to better explain human decision-making and cognitive science and neuroscience. So here we are using social laser framework to explain how some ideas on social media, they are amplified. They are actually amplified like a laser, just like a physical laser. They are amplified. However, some other ideas which are more related to scientific content, factual analysis, that kind of content is actually suppressed. And some other kind of content which is more emotional, more emotional, more appealing to the emotions of the sentiments of the human beings, that content is actually amplified, just like a laser. So there are coherent information waves that are floating with high amplitudes on social media, and such waves can be treated as the exhibition of bandwagon effect and the echo chamber effect. You know, this echo chamber effect is similar to the optical cavity that we have in the laser that actually gives the feedback, and the feedback, helps in further propagation of the wave. So we can treat the echo chamber as the optical cavity of the laser, and we can do a mathematical analysis of that. So bandwagon effect and echo chamber effect can be modeled mathematically using the social laser framework of quantum-like modeling. Certain behavioral patterns are amplified and they are sharpened by this feedback of the echo chamber effect, the optical cavity of the laser. And we can do that by using mathematical analysis. We can show how certain behaviors are actually getting amplified. However, certain other behaviors which are more emotional, which are more factual, which are more scientific, those kind of scientific studies are actually getting suppressed. They are not actually getting amplified in the social laser framework. That is what several studies are showing. So several studies, they have been conducted on YouTube's recommendation algorithm, and most of them actually prove that algorithm is all about emotional engagement, and thus it goes against the neutral and balanced science. A study recently did content analysis of 390 videos over 39 YouTube channels, and found that professional content, scientific content was very good, but it was not popular. It was not popular on social media. But the user-generated content, which was much more emotional and it was catering to human sentiments, that was getting more traction, and that was actually getting amplified like social laser, and it was getting more views It was even getting millions of views in few hours. However, certain scientific content was not getting those many views. Filter bubble effect of YouTube also pushes the users in a radicalization spiral. However, the factual resources on YouTube, on various social media algorithms, they are not getting amplified. These are various studies that we have these days. And one such study also showed that the intensity of negative emotional sentiment is positively associated with video views. But when the research content becomes more factual, and when it becomes more unbiased, more balanced, then it is not getting the traction. It is not entering in that social laser. Therefore, we can argue that YouTube algorithm has tendency to go against open science. And this might be true for other algorithms as well. They might be going against open science. So this is the last slide. These are some suggestions for open science on social media. So I can suggest broadly two suggestions. So one would be change in social media algorithms by co-designing, co-developing artificial intelligence with civil society. This will ensure more transparency in the algorithm, more explainable AI, more open source algorithms. So this can lead to open science. And the second suggestion would be that we can change the way we as researchers use social media, how we upload our videos on YouTube, how we upload our content on Twitter. We can change that. We need to study more, like how we can get traction on YouTube, on social media. What do they want? Do they want more frequency of uploads? Do they want certain kind of a thumbnail, or whether it is dependent upon the subscribers? So what do these social media algorithms, what do they want? We need to study more about that. And as researchers, we need to take care of that. And once we take care of these things, we can promote a culture of open science on social media. So thank you so much for listening to me. I would be happy to take your questions. And these are some of the references. You can refer to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshuma. That was really a very interesting presentation. Big tech has become a source of controversy these days, the way they have been silencing voices and ideologies. But we have to admit also that during the COVID time, the way misinformation was floating on Twitter and YouTube, I think that the algorithm did a pretty good job in silencing at that misinformation, especially the ones coming from a large group of organized anti-vaxxers. So I think some of the criticism is
Yeah, right. It is obviously a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Both
So
pros and
anyway,
cons.
yeah. So I would like I don't see the other two participants in the panelists. So I'll open the floor to the attendees and to other panelists.
Gautam, Nidhi has joined on behalf of Tanya.
So, but I don't see her in the panel.
Okay, she can unmute and she can. Nidhi, can you talk?
She's not here. That the message was posted by her during the first half of the session, but she is not here now.
There is Nidhi Shiravant.
Yeah, Nidhi is here. Nidhi, if you are here, can you please unmute yourself?
I actually already made the talking permission enabled, so. Okay, it doesn't look like.
Okay, in the meantime, if any panelists or any attendees have any question for the presenters, we do have two questions in the Q&A box, one for Dr. Anup Das and one for Radhika, if they would like to answer. So I think Dr. Anup Das has already answered one question. For Radhika, there is one question from an anonymous guest. How open innovation will tackle? Okay, this has already been taken by me. Another is, how do you, to Dr. Trikha, how do you envision incorporation of citizen science in the framework of innovation culture? Radhika, would you like to take that?
Radhika is not here. I think she's dropped out of the call.
Okay. Okay, can you please give the permission to Nidhi? She has raised her hand.
Nidhi has a permission to.
Yeah, Nidhi, you can unmute yourself and ask. Nidhi, we can't hear you if you are speaking. Okay, if anyone else has a question for our presenters, Anshuman and Dr. Das are still here.
So I have some questions.
Yes, Dr. Das, please go ahead.
Yeah, should I answer the questions?
Yes, please.
One thing is that is DST project still on and updated. So that particular project which was supported by Department of Science and Technology and their division NST-MIS, National Science Technology in Information System. So they are maintaining the website. They are maintaining still the website, but project has ended. So I think some of the resources may be overlapped because which are supported by DST are also available on the STEM portal. So some of the resources may be overlapped, but I have not studied equipment wise or because this is a huge study. You have to identify the equipment, then you have to see the equipment available on ISTEM portal or not. So that is a huge study. And the question number 2, that do we have any data who currently uses ISTEM database? So there is no individual user level data available for the visitors of ISTEM portal. Not only visitors, that registered users also cannot see who are the other users using ISTEM portal. That is not open to other users. And also that how can we extend the database to neighboring countries? I think there is one ITech program available with the Minister of External Affairs. They conduct different capacity development programs, and ISTEM portal resources can also be used by the researchers in neighboring countries or in South Asian innovators and researchers. They can utilize that ISTEM portal resources, and I think ISTEM portal can have some kind of collaboration with ITech program of Minister of External Affairs, so that this can happen. And also there are other bilateral or multilateral agencies involved in the scientific cooperation in those countries in South Asia. So they can be also engaged in this area or utilizing ISTEM portal resources for the general researchers or innovators in other neighboring countries. So that is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Das. And we have one question for Radhika. If you are there, would you like to take this one? A question has been posted. How do you envision incorporation of citizen science in the framework of innovation culture? Would you like to answer that in like 2 minutes?
Yeah. Am I audible, Gautam?
Yeah, you are. Please.
Yeah. A very pertinent question. We are all talking about citizen science, and citizen science is one of the essential attributes for an open science and open innovation culture, where we are inviting all the stakeholders, be the citizen of science, to give an input related to anything related to science, technology, and innovation, related to frugal innovations and other kind of aspects that from innovation that we want to come across. So I think so, yes, citizen science and more of the platforms that we are talking about, integrated platform, interaction platforms, be it at a physical level or be at a virtual level, they will increase the participation of citizens in the process of research, innovation, and that will attract more of the citizens, and the citizen science through the whole process will contribute to the acceleration of an innovation. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thanks,
the
Radhika.
second one is IP one. And I think so this is one of the burning topic and challenges that we all are facing. So I read this quote somewhere which talked about what is an open science. So open science, the basic principle behind it is like open as possible and closed as necessary. So I think so keeping in mind what kind of a closeness is required for an IP, intellectual property, to be filed and registered. Rest can be put into an open platform. So I think so it's the mixture, a fine line has to be drawn between an IP and open science. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. And unfortunately, we cannot have one of the presenter present her paper. We'll try to accommodate her tomorrow if time permits. So we'll now end these flash talks. I thanks to all the presenters who joined and presented their ideas and opinion pieces. And we'll now take a 2 minutes break. And after that, we'll go to the last session, a plenary lecture by Dr. Pablo Vommaro and Dr. Dominique Babini from CLACSO. So we'll rejoin in 2 minutes now. Thanks, everyone. Session. So welcome to all the participants and attendees to this final session of the day, which is a plenary lecture by Dr. Pablo Vommaro and Dr. Dominique Babini. Both the speakers are representatives of the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, also known as CLACSO in short. CLACSO is an international non-governmental institution founded in the year 1967 and is based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. CLACSO brings together more than 800 research centers in the field of social sciences and humanities in 51 countries in Latin America and other continents. So Dr. Pablo Vommaro is the research director at CLACSO. He has a PhD in social sciences from the University of Buenos Aires. He is also a member of the working group Youth, Children, Policies, Cultures and Institutions of CLACSO, and also the director of the book collection about youth, which has published around 45 books between 2015 and 2022. The other speaker is Dr. Dominique Babini, who is the Open Science Advisor at CLACSO. She has a PhD in political science and a postgraduate degree in information science. She is a representative of CLACSO at various committees, such as Open Science at Ministry of Science, Argentina, UNESCO Open Science Partnership, and International Science Council Steering Group on the Future of Scientific Publishing. The topic of the lecture is Importance of Open Science for the Global South, Perspectives from Latin America. So over to you, Dr. Pablo and Dr. Dominique.
Perfect.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, but it's a presentation. I think, Domi, it's the.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pablo.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. And on behalf of CLACSO, me and Dominique Babini will present this this PPT called as the host said. Thank you. Importance of the open science for the global South perspective from Latin America. As the presenter, Domi, change please.
Yes.
As the presenters said, CLACSO is the biggest global network of social sciences and humanities with a Latin America perspective and with a Latin America and Caribbean perspective, but in the global agenda, in the global world. Next, please. So CLACSO is based on the principles of open science and knowledge as a public good and a human right. This is important, is one of our main objective, our main vision is the open science and knowledge as a public good and a human right. Next, please. What is the CLACSO path toward democratizing open science? What is CLACSO's path, or what are CLACSO path toward democratizing open sciences? First, next, please, Domi. Yeah, thank you. First, no, the maps, yeah, sorry. First, we want to show you the CLACSO map to see the global global view that CLACSO has. CLACSO is based in Latin America and the Caribbean. CLACSO has a Latin American and Caribbean perspective, but CLACSO is in other regions, in other continents, in India too, of course, in Africa, in other countries of Asia, Europe, United States, Canada, etc. So the next one, yeah. Yeah, what are the CLACSO path toward democratizing open science? The CLACSO grants calls require a description of how and where research output will be available in open access. CLACSO network published more than 400 journals in open access and more than 3,000 books in open access, no APC, full open access, of course. CLACSO's repository has 100,000 full text from member institute. Articles, journal, books, book chapters, research, opinion papers, multimedia, etc. The campaign promoting non-commercial open access in Latin America and the Caribbean, together with other open access initiative in the region and in the world, yeah, this campaign was one of the first campaign in Latin America and in the Caribbean, and one of the first campaign in the world, maybe also in the world, yeah, always in a collaborative vision with other initiative in open access. Alliances, yeah, of course, CLACSO has alliances. CLACSO, digamos, maintain, digamos, analysis, digamos, sorry, digamos, with, digamos, Redalic and Amelica, and a joint collection of 125 social sciences and humanity quality journal completely in open access. Also, CLACSO launched the Latin American Forum on digamos, research, digamos, assessment, called FOLEC. The, digamos, acronym in Hispanic is FOLEC, for, digamos, reorienting research assessment mechanism to foster open science. Undertakes research also with the India, digamos, institution, of course, advocacy and consensus on changes. Next, please. Thank you. One of the more important CLACSO path toward open sciences and participative science is the working groups program. CLACSO has 90 working groups with more than 5,000 members. The objective of the working groups is the creation of interdisciplinary network of researchers articulated with public policy, decision makers, and referent of social organization, social movements, research on relevant social issues and problems from Latin America and the Caribbean. It is recommended that the 70% of members of the working groups are researchers, and the other 30% other participants between social movement, policymaker, activists, and other social actors. Equal gender representation, of course, and the working groups and CLACSO stimulates the participation of young researchers in the working groups, of course. The working groups incorporate the South-South and North-South perspective, the South-South and North-South dialogue, to, digamos, recognizing the knowledge produced in the two regions. All collaborative activities and output from the working groups should be open to the public and or open access, of course. Working groups so are a path toward knowledge creation processes to make it more inclusive and collectively governed by society. Next, please. One of the main digamos, initiative from CLACSO for the open sciences, for the open knowledge, is the declaration produced by FOLEC, Declaration on Research Assessment, produced recently 2 months ago in our global conference was in Mexico in June 2022. Laura Robelli, she is a coordinator of FOLEC, of our forum, will be in this Congress and will present these 14 principles, 14 items and topic of our declaration in other panel, in other session of this Congress. And next, please. And the last one point that we want to remark in this path, in this CLACSO path toward the open science and the open access, is our declaration on open access as a commons. Open access as a commons is the title of our declaration of produced in 2015 and approved in our assemblies, in our conference in Colombia in 2015. This is a important stage, important step in our work toward democratizing open science. So, Dominique, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Can you hear me, the organizers, correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you
Dominique.
very much. Well, let's share which has been the Latin American path towards open science in general. It's a region where scientific publishing belongs to the academic institutions. It's a region that has not outsourced publishing to the commercial sector. The first declaration of open access was in 2005 in Brazil for all the region, asking governments, which are the main funders of research in our regions, asking them to require that publicly funded research be made openly available, that the cost of making it open access should be assumed by the governments also, which fund research in universities, and strengthen the local open access journals, repositories, and other venues for open access, and promote the integration of all that research output from our region in the world knowledge base. This last issue, all the previous ones were successful, and the last one is lacking because Web of Science and Scopus too poorly represent output from our region in Spanish and in Portuguese. So we had to find other ways to give visibility and access to our outputs in the region. In Latin America, I mentioned it's community-owned and governed open access. The main leading role is in universities. And today, it's a region with the highest adoption of open access for its journals. We have several universities that run huge collections of open journal system free software, OGS. They run their own collections of journals. And then we have national portals of quality journals, and we have regional portals of quality journals like Latindex, Redalica Melique, and Cielo. Together they index about 2,000 journals from our region. And then we have national and institutional open access priorities, which favor repositories for open access. So we have a network, a regional network in Latin America that gathers repositories from the region, about 700 repositories in the region. And more recently, the trend is managing research data platforms at the institutional and national level. And what CLACSO does, and Pablo showed, co-production of knowledge with other societal actors. This is a very recent trend. In CLACSO, it's a 20 years trend, but it grows slowly. Our community governments of open access in the region contributes to equity, to inclusion, to bibliodiversity, and to multilingualism, because it doesn't exclude languages or formats or diverse modes of communication. The results are good, are reasonably good. If we want to get to the community, if knowledge is a public good, open access is doing well in the region, because here you can see the two most important indexing services of quality journals in the region, Cielo and Redalic. 25 of their users are the general public. They use the contents for professional practice, for their personal use. And during the pandemic, it was in support of virtual education also. And 50% of users of those services are students. So open access in Latin America is contributing to train the new generations. Our learned lesson in Latin America after 2 decades of open access is that open science needs to be community-led and supported by non-profit public open infrastructures. It was interesting, one of the presentation, one of the cases in the previous panel about open infrastructures and the need to know where they are located and what services they provide. Which is the international context in support of democratizing open science in South of Asia, in Latin America, in Africa? We want to share with you 3 of the documents, or 4, we consider the most important context we can use to promote the vision this conference has and your network has about promoting open science in South Asia countries, with the vision that I heard in the previous presentations today here at the conference. First, the document of the global goals, the Global Sustainable Development Goals. There's not one of these 17 goals which doesn't need as much local as international research outputs. So we need to value the research outputs in our regions and in our countries, in all kind of formats, in all languages, in diverse ways of communicating knowledge produced by communities. One of them is the academic community. Then the UNESCO recommendations mentioned by many participants today. We want to stress some of the issues mentioned in the recommendation, not excluding the possibility to participate because of economic circumstances. APCs was an issue all this day in the presentations, not excluding because of discipline or geographic locations or gender, ethnicity, language, which are all ways of excluding us from Latin America and you from South Asia in the mainstream indicators used for research assessment. Then we need equitable participation. How are we going to participate in our regions if we have to pay APCs? I agree with your presentations during today. It's a great issue. We need to integrate diverse communities. Dr. Tandon this morning mentioned diversity of knowledges. We have to integrate those in the research process. We need to promote bibliodiversity, multilingualism, collaboration, not competitive, but collaborative research, non-commercial publishing models that do not involve APC or BPC, and harmonize incentives and evaluation systems to favor open science. You will hear more on Wednesday when Laura Rovelli from CLACSO FOLEC will make the presentation, as Laura is coordinator of FOLEC. Another document is from the International Science Council, the global voice of science. And we want to stress 2 points. The International Science Council is also in one of the panels of this conference. The first point that also speak about not excluding because of the ability to pay, the language or geography, and the last point about the governance of the process of dissemination of scientific knowledge should be accountable to the scientific community. This is the trend. These are the new recommendations. These are the policies that should guide all our actions for our regions. Then we have 20 years after the first declaration, the Budapest Declaration for Open Access in 2002. Now, 20 years later, acknowledging the problems we have in open access being commercialized, the new recommendations, we will share the 4, are a guide for the next 10 years. The first recommendations to host open access research on open infrastructures. This will minimize the risk of future access restriction or control by commercial organizations. The second recommendation, the need to reform research assessment and rewards. So we adjust research assessment practices to open science. Eliminate disincentives for open access and create positive new incentives for open access. The third recommendation, an issue raised many times today in the conference, favor inclusive publishing and distribution challenge that never exclude authors on economic grounds. Take full advantage of open access repositories and non-APC journals, the green and diamond road to open access. Move away from article processing charges. It is not the way forward for open access. When it started 20 years ago, it was to get away from the commercialization of scholarly communications. And we are now with APCs again trapped in the commercial circuit. And APCs, as it was mentioned here in the conference, is not the correct road because it helps predatory journals. It incentives starting to charge APCs in a region which is diamond, like Latin America. White journals that don't charge APCs should start charging APCs. Because if they say, because if everyone will charge APCs, we have to do the same. No, you don't have to do the same. The Diamond Open Access journals are a huge contribution from public universities and governments to support democratization of open access. The fourth recommendation, avoid concentrating new open access literature in commercial dominant journals. Invest the money in open access infrastructure which are non-commercial. Move away from read and publish agreements, because those read and publish agreements are an excellent way to transform not the scholarly communication, but to transform the industry from having outrageous profits with subscriptions to have outrageous profits with APCs. So we have to favor, instead of using money for APCs, we have to use money to build the non-commercial open access infrastructures in our regions. Another document which is interesting to support your advocacy on democratization of knowledge production and distribution is a manifesto prepared by a network of research groups where India also, no, where South Asia also participated. It was not India, it was another of few countries. And look at the center, you recognize the usual functions of open access and an open science. But then the dark circle outside puts in context the situated openness, which needs to happen in a context that protects cognitive justice, sustainable development, knowledge commons, equitable collaboration. And this is an interesting image to use in support of the need of situated openness. How can we collaborate at interregional level on open science issues? On our side, we have three main concerns. The one is about underfunding of community-owned infrastructures, because the scarce funds we have will be directed to APCs. To avoid this, we think we have to prioritize funding and resources dedicated to non-APCs, BPC community-based infrastructures, and initiatives of quality certifications of its contents. Because if repositories are not very much attractive for researchers, it is because we have to add quality certifications. Why our researchers are using their time to peer review articles of the commercial circuit? Why don't we dedicate and we reward the time of researchers dedicated to peer review contents in our repositories so they can certify quality? The second issue is weak international dialogue and cooperation. We call for more international collective action, have a stronger and collective voice, and for South-South cooperation for international non-commercial open access and open science initiatives. And a third issue of our concern is researchers rewarded only when publishing in mainstream journals with prestige industry indicators, making invisible all other contributions. We need to reward quality and relevance independent of quality venue. What is important is to publish in a journal that has quality peer review. Independent that it is in the mainstream or in our regional journals or local journals. If it is a quality journal, it has to be valued in the reward process. And we need to reward doing peer review of contents from community-based infrastructure, as is the case of repositories. COAR, the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, is working towards next generation repositories, and one of the functions will be peer review. Way to advance South-South cooperation, some ideas, is sharing news. In the past 2 decades, with Dr. Subia Arunashalam and other members of your institutes, among the participants, I see the names of some of them. We have been sharing concerns, experiences, information, opinions, and that has to get more movement. So in this OSSAN network, you should increase that activity. Then we have to alert when there are issues, of interest for other regions. So now we have the OSTP mandate approved by the executive in USA, and this and the Plan S in Europe both will increase the number of journals charging APCs. So we have to think, what joint actions, South-South, could we start to alert the world about the impact it will have in developing regions? And we can join in groups, international groups, drafting documents. In the case of CLACSO, we have participated in drafting the BOAI, the Budapest New Declaration I just mentioned. And CLACSO participates also in the International Science Council groups, in the UNESCO evaluation group. FOLEC participates. So I invite your countries to look for ensuring participation of your countries in those groups, and invite presentations from other regions in your events, as DST has invited us here, CLACSO, to be participating. Another ways is collaborative research projects on open science issues. An example will be presented on Wednesday also in this conference about the project sponsored by IDRC, a project where CLACSO and DST work together about research, informed debate, and influence policy making on research assessment that has to be funded, and then promote international declarations, participate in international working groups, and share all your open contents, share them in the directories of repositories, in the directories of open access journals. Ensure that your contents are harvested by academic portals like BASE in Germany, CORE in England. And we also can exchange technical support and training. We know of Redalic, Amelica in Latin America, contributing with a Journal of Horticultural Science in India, which is included in Redalic. And we can start many other collaborative initiatives. We suggest you contribute to ensure that your countries contribute to the implementation of UNESCO recommendations. Your country can participate in the Global Open Science Partnership. If you have courses and training about open science capacity building, you can add them to this survey of UNESCO about mapping open and internationally relevant open science models. And you can promote the international declarations in your country, the one of International Science Council we have mentioned, which says that the scientific record must be free of financial barrier for any researchers to contribute. That means no APCs, and free of financial barriers so that any user can access for it immediately after publications. And the Declaration of Budapest, BOAI 20. Sorry, I have my battery. There. BOAI, which says no APCs and no need of transformative agreement. Those are examples of the steps forward. We close CLACSO's presentation today saying that, as John Wilinski from Stanford University and from the PKP project said, we have to make an ongoing series of decisions all the time. We have to think about who is being included and who is being excluded. What seems open to us today, we have to ask ourselves, will this seem open tomorrow? We have to know that one path takes us to science as a commodity, and the other path where we should be working all together, where science is a public good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Babini, and also Dr. Pablo for sharing CLACSO's efforts towards democratizing science in the Latin American region, and also what lessons that South-South cooperation in Asia, especially South Asia, can learn from your initiatives. It's really great to know about the work CLACSO and other regional initiatives have done and how they have shaped the global discourse on open science. I now open the floor to the audience for questions. Please use the hand raise icon to ask the question, or you can also type in your question in the chat box and I will take them up with the panelists.
So there are already a few questions about them. So
okay. Yeah, so we do have a question. So the first one is, how do you think a network like OSSAN can cooperate with CLACSO on the overlapping priorities in open science? Dr. Pablo or Dr. Babini, if any one of you would like to answer.
Yes, well, I start, Pablo, and
yeah. Dominique, please.
And
please. Yeah,
I see Laura Rovelli is here, if she can also say something, but Laura Rovelli has coordinated with Pablo the project with DST. Momita is here. And you all participated. Doing research is a way of collaboration. Then inviting ourselves to our meetings is another way of working together. Then participating in international groups. Arun participates in the Future of Publishing IISc group, the International Science Council, and we exchange mails constantly with Arun or people from his team. And these are the ways. And sharing experiences, because I see the next question is about how can we change the problem of research assessment rewarding only when you publish in the mainstream circuit. We have an example, the National Research Council in Argentina for Social Science and Humanities puts at the same level to evaluate where you publish, puts at the same level Web of Science, Scopus, Cielo, Redalic, and Latindex, which are the indexing services in our region. So these 2,000 quality journals from social science and humanity, it's 1,000. So these 1,000 journals in Latin America, quality journals in social science and humanities, are considered at the same level as quality journals of the mainstream. So these examples can be shared so we get inspired. The presentation for Dr. Tandon today and the discussion in the different panels today for us are a learning lesson about what is your experience in South Asia and which are your challenges. So these are possibilities. Pablo or Laura, do you want to say something about this question?
Yeah, just I want to add that you can sign and support the CLACSO for digamos, declaration, a new research, digamos, assessment towards socially relevant science in Latin America and the Caribbean. Laura will present this declaration, these 14 points of this declaration. I think that in Wednesday, Dominique and yes, Laura, yes. in the next Wednesday, yes. Yeah, in the next Wednesday. But I think that we can share the declaration and invite you to sing and support it. It's other way to collaborative and it's other way of our collaboration. I just want to add that.
Yes. Another possibility, Pablo, is that the working groups, some of them could have members from the other regions. There are many groups.
Of course.
And
the
issue is language, because the working groups work mainly in Spanish and Portuguese. But some activities can be undertaken in collaboration with researchers in other regions and work in English to share activities. No? That is an alternative also.
Yeah, of course, and the working groups have participants, have members from the other region, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe too, and our South perspective. It's an important perspective to include in the working groups participants from other region and of course the language as you can see in my case is an issue, of course, but when we want to work in a collaborative way, I think that the language it's not a problem. It's a challenge, of course. It's a challenge, but I think that will be we are glad and will be a very important thing that the participant of this, some of the participant of this conference, of this Congress, will be members of our working groups. And now it's the call open until October 3. Until October 3, it's an open call to make new working groups for the next 3 years. Working groups, it's selected for 3 years, from 2023 to 2025.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo, for giving us the elaborate point how we can collaborate more. I have a question to Dominique, because there is one question in the chat box. Actually, taking clue from that question, I'll elaborate it a bit more. So, unfortunately, what we have seen, I mean, obviously, Professor Arunachalam has worked in India to promote open access, the green open access, for so many years. But what we see actually, that we could never engage the researchers, who are the one for which we are talking about, all the researchers of India, let's say all the scientists, the STEM researchers, most of them was never been, maybe we could not convince them properly, or they didn't find it important. I can't say, but the open access policy that India had, a wonderful one, it was never been implemented properly. And if we see currently that people are more comfortable, like the researchers are more comfortable with idea like one nation, one subscription, where the idea is to kind of all the commercial publishers, you negotiate with them for access, or even I'm not sure if it is in place, but I hear about it that they're even considering APC deals with them, because that's how they are comfortable with, or that's how the mainstream science in India works. And why I'm saying that, this is another question to this, the questions in the chat box, that research assessment is so much aligned with the mainstream publishing, because that's where you get recognition, and trying to change that probably also did not work so far. So under this complex situation, what will be your, let's say, opinion to bring people to listen? Or is there a middle ground possible somewhere which can be a stepping stone towards the perfect scenario? So do you, both Pablo and Dominique, this question is to you, because this is what the reality in India.
Yes. I go, Pablo.
Yeah, of course, Dominique, thank you.
CLACSO's opinion is that we have to address the new generations. We have to let them know that the academic community in the developed regions is starting to reappropriate the scholarly community, the scholarly communications, because they are not happy with the outrageous profits that the industry takes away from research to publish the mainstream journals. So we see the DORA declaration saying, alerting not to use the impact factor on research reward. We see the European Commission proposing changes in research assessment. It's not only the South, it's the North that is concerned about the commercialization of open access. So we need to be patient and know that we have to think about our own needs, our own problems, and which need as much local as international knowledge. And We have in Latin America the national purchase. It's a general resolution of the purchase of subscription journals is one payment from the government for all the university system and research system. So we know it, but it shouldn't be a necessity to enter the agreements of read and publish. In the BOAI declaration, which the Budapest Open Access Initiative, you can find one of the recommendations about not entering read and publish agreements, and it mentions which are the alternatives, where to put the money. And the word APC is mentioned, I looked, 99 times in the BOAI 20 recommendations. So there you will find all the ways to avoid APCs. But the main point is changing the research assessment procedures. If we don't change the research assessment procedures, which are based on indicators built by the industry to favor the journals that they select, which exclude great part of the research output of the world. So mathematicians, atomic energy physicists, biologists, some STM disciplines are living happily in that world because they have what they need and they are rewarding for participating there. But if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the majority of those goals have to do with other knowledge contributions. And Dr. Tandon, in his conference today, addressed that part. We need many knowledges to solve day-to-day problems and needs of our societies, not only reflected in the mainstream journals. So we need to reward that part of knowledge, which is today invisible in the research assessment procedures, which promote competitive research instead of collaborative research, which promote publishing one paper after the other in mainstream journals, and which make invisible all other knowledge outputs. And open science needs all other knowledge outputs. So the recommendations of UNESCO has been approved by 193 countries, and your country, our country, US, European countries, US, I don't know what declaration they issued because they are not members of UNESCO, but they retired but surely they issue documents about the recommendations. And it's a way forward. We don't see it now because we are concentrating in making our annual research report to the funders, and we know that the funders will evaluate us by the impact factor. But if you change that, so Laura on Wednesday will deal with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique, and thank you, Pablo, for such a nice presentation and actually putting forwards the ethos of real open science in front of us, because overall researchers are very concerned about the problems of APCs and also where to publish, because as you mentioned already that the rewarding system is centered so much around the commercial publishing. So for them, that is the only way. So for us, it would be to educate everyone and also let them know what are the other avenues, and moreover, how if everybody come forwards and adopt these practices, then only things can be changed. So we are hopeful to make some changes and also collaborate more. So today our time is over for this day. So I will end this session today, and also the program ends here with this wonderful talk by Dr. Pablo and Dr. Babini. So thank you all, and thank you all the attendees, and we look forward to see you again tomorrow in the morning session. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations to all the organizing team.
Yeah, congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you.